Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Black Doctoral Network weekly web series entitled Conversation Starters. I'm very excited for you all to be joining us this evening as our topic of discussion this evening is teacher education and leadership. And to help us facilitate this discussion, we have some excellent expert panelists that will be joining us this evening. The first panelist that we have is Dr. Charlene Lewis, who has her PhD in educational leadership and policy. She's currently a principal for the Knox County Schools, and her research interest entails social justice leadership and cultural competency in education. I welcome you, Dr. Lewis.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello.
All right. Our next panelist that we have is Dr. Jamel Atkins Sharif, who has his doctorate in urban educational leadership and policy, and with his JD from Rutgers University, Newark School of Law. He's currently the director of a nonprofit organization located out of New York, but he's actually the director in Boston. He has his research interest in Black school leaders and racial and social justice in schools. He also is really heavy on looking from the Black lens on how it is applied to curriculum in schools and educator prep. I welcome you, Dr. Atkins Sharif.
Thank you, Dr. Yolanda. I'm happy to be here.
All right, and our third panelist joining us is Mr. James Colsey. He is actually a doctoral candidate in educational leadership. His research interests include teacher professional development, school policy on all levels of education, as well as student achievement, and he's currently an English instructor. I welcome you this evening.
Thank you.
All right, so I want to go ahead and jump right into this topic, which I know is very relevant to our audience as we look at the educational system and how it has been changing and evolving with the pandemic that's currently going on. And the first question that I have for you all is how important is the inclusion of cultural factors in educational leadership? I'll go ahead and start with Dr. Lewis.
So, with the diversity of students that currently in the educational system, the inclusion of cultural factors are central and able to, in order to provide equal opportunity for these students to learn and be successful. So, at times we talk about including more activities and more programs and stuff for our students, but there's still a gap as far as actually implementing these discussions. So it's very important in order for these students to feel. A lot of these students who are in schools and they're in the minority pool, they feel isolated. They don't feel part of the system, which impacts their ability to learn and grow. So it's very important to include some of those.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Dr. Atkins Sharif.
Yes, thank you. Just to kind of add to what Dr. Lewis said, it's critically important. Since I believe 2014, the national public school incoming kindergarten class has been majority non-white. And so what that means is we are quickly approaching that point where the majority of the children in our nation's public schools will be children of color. And that means our Black, our Latino, our Native American, our Asian students, their cultural backgrounds and experiences are key to engaging them in school. And that it is no accident that for much of their educational history in our nation's public schools, their culture, their linguistic practices, their ways of being known have been demeaned and undermined. And so in an age we're looking to empower those communities, it is key that we bring their cultural experiences and their cultural knowledge to the classroom and to the teaching experience.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Kulsi.
First of all, we're looking at the culture as the way a group of people live in a geographical community. The culture, it tells a lot of things We have the norms, we have value, we have belief system, we have religion, we have language. When you go to a group of people in a particular environment, they have a specific culture, the way they eat, the food they eat, the way they dress, the kind of drums that they play, their clothing, everything. They have a culture there. So you can identify every individual in that particular geographical community with the culture that he or she belongs to.
Mhm.
So the inclusion of culture is very important because as educational leader, you must understand the culture of every individual. You have to understand the culture of your people. You have to understand the culture of your subordinate so that when they are talking, you know where he or she is coming from. When they are talking, you know where they are coming from, so that in case of anything, you know that this is the culture of the people, and you'll be able to relate with the people effectively and positively. So,
Mhm.
the cultural aspect of education is very important for the leader to identify individual with the cultural practice that he or she practice. Thank you very much.
Oh,
Mhm.
thank you for that. As you can, with all your answers, it sounds to me that cultural factors is highly important, and it really directs how effective the teaching style, the execution of any policy or plan will be within the educational system. So, thank you all for that response. The next question that I have is, how important is the implementation of socially just educational leadership practices in the educational system? I'm going to go ahead and start with Dr. Lewis.
So first off, when you talk about social justice, socially just leadership, it encompasses a lot of things. The educators, the leaders in the building, being aware of anything that may eliminate students being provided with equal education, whether or not it's a school that has a group of students that are not offered the same rigor of classes. You may not have uh, AP classes offered, or if you do, it's not an inclusion of minority students in there. It could encompass as much as not having, similar to what Dr. What was it, Coach
Let's see.
Kosi, I am so sorry, Dr.
You're
Kosi
fine.
was saying about being aware of the different cultures and the different dialects and the representation of different cultures within the school building. So when principals and educators go in with this awareness, it's kind of like a confirmation that these students are going to be provided an equal opportunity and an equal education to be better in society. And so when we look at this, we look at all of these different platforms that provide these students the opportunity to learn equally. Are we providing all students the opportunity to get AP courses? Are we providing all students the opportunity to have different languages instead of the three languages that we think are important? Are we providing students with different clubs and inclusions? When educators are aware of that, it's going to start building a better educational system for all of the students that are transitioning into our school system. So it's very important for us to be aware of the different social justice needs of and each building has a different need. You can't, it's not a one fit all. And this one, I think it's important that whatever school building you're in, whatever institute that you're in, that you need to be aware of what that culture for that building. It's not a, so you have to be aware of that.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Coltsy, what is your thoughts?
Thank you very much. The social justice we're talking about,
Mm.
we are referring to injustices in a society.
Mhm.
We are referring to inequalities that has been creating biases in our various schools or institutions. Now, let's look at the injustice like gender. We're looking at ethnicity. We can look at even the language. When you consider all these elements, we are talking about educational institution. How do we treat people equally? We have biases against women. I am a gender advocate for women. We have biases against them. when women are supposed to be put in a higher position, we rather reduce the capacity of women. We rather try to demoralize women by ensuring that we put men in the position that women are supposed to be. That is gender inequality, which is not anything that I like at all. So, as educational leaders, we are aware of these injustices. We are aware of these inequalities in our institution. So, what we have to do as educational leaders is to ensure that once we are aware of these practices in our organization, we try as much as possible to eliminate them totally so that we'll be able to create balance within our organizational institution to ensure that student achievement is our target. So my plate with every leader is to ensure that all these inequalities are totally eliminated in our organization to promote effective teaching and learning in our educational setup. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Atkins Sharif, what are your thoughts?
Yes, thank you. So it kind of relates back to your first question because in thinking about the cultural factors, right? We must keep in mind that there is an unspoken culture that exists in schools, right? So schools are designed around a model of basically middle class white American lifestyles, right? As school leaders, we begin every year comparing through accountability reports the performance, the academic performance of Black children, children of color, English language learners, children of low socioeconomic. We compare all of those children to a white middle class norm group of students, right? Our teaching practices come from that same cultural background. So whether it's stated or not, our schools exist in a environment that centers and values white middle class American ways of knowing and being. So we are automatically stepping into a cultural space. And so what we're saying is we've got to claim and lift the other cultures that are in those school settings. So how this relates to social justice is that those frames have also led us to some detrimental outcomes for children of color. So in my dissertation research, I looked at my role as a former principal and how we tried to dismantle some of those systems, focusing on disparities in discipline of children of color, particularly not just boys, but particularly boys. Um, as Dr. Lewis spoke earlier, right? Disparate access or disproportionate lack of access to accelerated programs or gifted programs. Also, caregiver involvement in schools, where children from communities of color or from English language learner backgrounds feel disempowered and feel like their efforts are not valued to engage the school because the ways that they may value engagement may differ from what the school's checklist is for this represents parent involvement, right? So as Dr. Clussy and Dr. Lewis are saying, it is incumbent on education leaders to identify those ways that we've described in which those communities and those children are experiencing barriers either to access or to positive outcomes. And our job is to change our policies and our practices in order to dismantle those barriers.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for highlighting that. I love how each of you highlighted various parts of this whole phenomenon with Dr. Lewis highlighting increasing opportunities, Dr. Coltsy highlighting the factors with regard to creating balance and being aware of the inequalities that are currently present, and Dr. Atkins Sharif really looking at the whole system as it is and, like you said, dismantling it in order to really be applicable to other cultures, specifically African Americans. So definitely thank you. The next question that I have for you all is, how would you describe the relationship between educational leadership and student achievement? I'll go ahead and start with Dr. Coltsy.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'm going to look at leadership. Leadership is about influence. Leadership is about relationship building. Leadership is about communication, effective communication. However, Martin Luther King Jr. said that when you are given a task to be performed, you must perform the task in such a way that no one in history would have done that task better than you have done. Meaning that as a leader, your job is task performance. And for you to be able to perform that, you have to set a target. Now, as leadership is about relationship building, we expect educational leaders to have relationship between their teachers. We need educational leaders to have relationship with their students. It is the duty of our educational leaders to ensure that they create an atmosphere, an environment that is devoid of panic, that is devoid of hostilities, an environment that allows students to have free peace of mind to be able to study. But if we have educational leaders who do not allow this kind of environment to be seen within their organization, they are likely to have problems with teachers, they are likely to have problems with students. Therefore, student achievement will not be something that is palatable. So it is the duty of our educational leaders to ensure that they create this link, the relationship. There must be a relationship between the teachers and the student. There must be a relationship between the principals and the teachers. And if all these relationships exist, then automatically we are looking at the standard, high standard of performance in our educational institution. But a situation where a leader does not allow his subordinate to interact with him or her, I don't think this situation is good. So as leaders, we need to ensure that we create atmosphere that allows every individual to flow with any information. There are leaders who do not want to bring communication to the doorstep of teachers, to the doorsteps of students. When we are taking a decision, it is our duty to include both teachers and students in our decision. But sometimes when we have autocratic leader, a very close environment, this environment does not allow the free flow of information. When students have issue, they don't know who they're going to report to. So as leaders, we need to create an environment where students will be able to flow with any piece of information they have. So we'll be able to go with them, take decision with them, and implement decision with them so we can achieve the targets that we set in our institution. So educational leader, we need to create an atmosphere of liberty. We need to create an atmosphere of freedom for the free flow of information and for that matter to increase student achievement. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Atkins Sharif, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. So thanks. So I would just I would agree with everything I've heard from Dr. Clutchy. That clearly the education leaders, we do stand in the gap in a sense. The research has clear that the most effective variable, the most instrumental variable in student success is the teacher, right? And the most instrumental variable in school success is the leader. So we have to stand in the bridge between, as Dr. Clutchy said, between the students and the students and their communities and the inside of the school. The only thing I would add to Dr. Clutchy's analysis is we also have an obligation to empower the voices of those who have historically not been included. In addition to students, their families, their caregiver communities, the leader has an obligation to make space for parents of color who have not heretofore been involved in parent council or parent teacher organizations, or who sat on school improvement boards, right? So the extent to which we can bring the community into the school, so that they see the success of the school is intimately tied to their own expectations. That is also the role of education leaders.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Dr. Lewis, what are your thoughts?
So I have to agree with the rest of the people on the panel. I agree wholeheartedly. And one of the things that you all said, and I think um, Dr. Atkins Sharif was saying when you said obligation. So, my research for principal socially just leadership, one of the things that made an effective leader in diverse school was a moral obligation to help the students, right? It's a moral obligation. I am here for the students. So therefore, anything that I do is going to be for the students. The students are the focus. So I'm going to prepare better professional development for my teachers so they can improve the achievement of my students. I am going to reach out into the community to educate them so they can better support the education of my students. So the moral obligation is there, and I'm gonna go ahead and just stir the pot just a tad. And I think one of the things that's lacking in a lot of the school systems is the reflection of the inclusion of culture in different schools. So a lot of times when you look at schools that have and educators or leaders have a more obligation is that they have a connection to that community, right? They're from that community. They're part of that community. I graduated from this high school. I went to school with these people. So they come in with a natural more obligation to be in the school. If you look at some of my failing schools and look at a lot of the representation of the leadership in there, it does not represent a lot of the students that's in there. So is there a more obligation or is it a more obligation to get the job done? And then that's the disconnect when we talk about the socially just leadership. I'm going into a situation that I'm not morally obligated to be honest because I'm not a part of this culture. I'm not a part of this community. There's nothing making me thrive to do that. Not saying that it's anything bad, but it's something that we need to be aware of. And I see that a lot in our school system. I'm just going to put it out there. I'm still in the school system, but if you look at it, the like they were saying, the principal is in the middle, right? And so it's a reflection of that community. It should be a reflection of the students, and it should be a reflection of their more obligation to better the school. So this more obligation is very important, and it's something that's missing in a lot of the school system. It's not a reflection. We don't do a good job in including enough culture to be reflective.
Okay. Thank you for that. I love how you all provided various viewpoints on this specific question because when you look at educational leadership, one might think it's just solely the leader's responsibility.
Mhm.
But as you said, cultural factors, the caregivers, the parents, an actual relationship is necessary. So
Mhm.
that is very important that you all highlighted that. The next question that I have is what disparities do you witness as it relates to race and educational leadership? I'll go ahead and start with Dr. Atkins Sharif.
Yes. Thank you. Well, I don't know where to begin, right? So there is the fact that educators of color, their involvement in our schools is not keeping pace with the demographic shifts where our public school system is becoming majority non-white, and the pace of inclusion of educators of color is not keeping pace with that. Also, there is the issue of retention, where educators of color, both teachers and leaders, find themselves in environments where they're not duly supported, where they don't see representations of themselves in higher positions above them. Mentoring by people who have lived the experience they have is in short supply. And so those things result in and disproportionate numbers of school leaders and newer teachers of color end up being dropped in high need schools where they're least prepared to work with the most needy students and school populations. So when you put all that together, it does not invite educators of color, or at least not invite them to stay for the long haul.
Mhm.
And this is the problem that we have currently.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Lewis.
I agree.
Yeah.
I have, I mean, and you think about what you just said, Dr. Atkins, Sharif, is that, did I say your name right? I
You said
apologize.
it right. You said it
Okay.
right.
Okay. I'm sorry. Whew. We talk about when I worked the recruitment fairs and and you're standing there and you see, and you're at an at-risk school, and you see the teachers of color or people, and they walk by your school, or it's only maybe 5 or 6 in a range of 100, and you're looking like, and everyone is going after those 5 or 6 to the point where you want to go to my school, my school.
Right, right,
And so, they're like the hot potato, but
yeah.
the retaining them is what's missing, because it goes back to the leaders in the school reflecting the demographics of the schools that they're serving, and people, the disparities in the discipline, the disparities in hiring minority students. I'm charging leaders out there. We're talking about closing the disparities in hiring, and we're talking about this, but we're not doing enough hiring of color. If I was to go through and ask people, are you hiring? Are you reaching out? Are you training them up? Are you taking the same amount of time to grow them as you do everyone else? And this is just for me witnessing as doing professional development with teachers, and training other teachers and working with other principals. What are you doing to close the disparities with our students with discipline? The disparities is when you look at one of the reasons that the disparity numbers are so high is because it's a lower amount of minority students. So of course, if you have 20% of African American students compared to 80%, the suspension rate is going to be higher, because the amount of students that are in the school building are lower. But what are you doing to reach these kids? We're pulling in the social emotional learning aspects of it, but how can I provide social emotional learning if I don't understand you, who you are? If I don't understand your background, if I don't understand some of the things that make you who you are, or if I'm not respectful to your culture and your language. So those are some of the disparities, and I see disparities in it. And I also see it with academics. We have this stigma on a lot of our kids that a lot of our kids leave schools to go to middle class schools or schools, suburban schools, because they feel when they're at a at-risk school or another school, they're not provided the same amount of educational opportunities because of the discipline. Is it the students, or is it that we're not providing enough people of color or people that represent the demographics to know how to relate to these kids? It's not that these kids cannot learn, it's just that you don't understand the way that I learn. And so in order for us to close the disparities, we need to step up the bar. We need to have professional development that's going to provide the opportunity to teach these people. And if you have a diverse staff, have practical professional development, not just standing around and feeling and talking about stories that you. What strategies do you do to get a disengaged student who daddy is in jail and mama is on? Just what are you doing to pull this student in to engage him? What are you doing to build him up? What are you saying that's going to motivate him? And more likely, are they seeing representations of themselves in the building? Because you can talk all you want to, but you're looking at the reflection of the people that work around you. So I just see they'll give you on it, because it's not enough. We just I'm charging everyone that's listening. What are you doing to close these practices? Are we reaching out? Because I chase them when I see them at the fair. I stalk them. I leave my hey, you want to talk Dr. Lewis, and then everybody else says, you want to work here, and so but then once they get there, how are we supporting them? And how we pushing them, and then what are we doing because I'm the first one when we're in meetings and we're in discipline meetings, and I tell teachers, well, that's why you got cursed out, because you don't say that to this student, or this student is not looking at looking in your eyes, because their coach don't look adults directly in the eyes, a form of disrespect, and you're saying, look at me. So making sure that we provide, if we have diverse people in our school, providing practical strategies and professional development that's going to help close some of these disparities. And I'm gonna be quiet. Thank you.
No, thank you for that. I love how you highlighted that, because I could tell you're very passionate about this question. No, but you really dove into a lot of the disparities, and you're mentioning the support, which is critical in academia when you're going into different levels of education. So thank you for that.
Can I add one thing? Which is, at the same time that we definitely need more diversity, and we need this teaching and leadership body to reflect the students, I also don't make assumptions that because you're black or brown or Latino, that you are necessarily arriving at a culturally sustaining place, right?
Mm.
Mhm.
There are teachers of color and leaders of color who I have worked under, and I have been complicit in my past as an educator, who held very deficit notions about black and brown children,
Yes.
right? It's all skin folk ain't kin folk, right?
Mm.
Yes.
So
Yes.
we still have an obligation
Mhm.
to make sure that those folks are properly prepared to walk into those spaces with an asset informed lens
Mhm.
in, regarding those children. Because
Mhm.
our people can also do damage to our children if we hold those negative beliefs about
Mhm.
their ability or about their culture.
Yeah,
Absolutely
thank
right.
you for that point. Thank
Yes.
you.
Very good
So,
point.
Dr. Kulti, we see we have a lot going on here. What are your thoughts?
Thank you very much. I agree with my colleagues, Dr. Lewis and Dr. Dumer, perfectly. I'm also going to add my voice.
Page your voice.
Here, here is the deal. Let's go practically. I believe that most of us have gone through the public school system, and we went through the hands of a white teacher or a black teacher. But the question is, what is the population of the black student? I'm talking about African American children in the public school.
Mhm.
Who teaches and leads these students? The African American children go to the white majority school.
Mm.
And the problem is, I'm coming up with the disparities now. This white man, a teacher or a woman teaching an African American child, what kind of culture do you expect them to impart on these children? Do you want a white culture or one African American culture? Somebody who is not ready to learn African culture, but because of the situation, we, the parents, we send our kids to them to teach. What do we expect? They're going to learn a different culture. That is where we see a lot of disparities. We see a lot of problems in the school because the white majority dominates the schools and they are teaching their culture. It is going to be difficult for our children, the black African American children, to learn their culture. That is where the student performance in public school, especially as related to the white African American children, is very poor. It is because the right people are not teaching them. Because they are not teaching them, these children find it very difficult to understand them. Now, if you want your child to understand culture, a culture, as we said, involves so many things.
Mhm.
And if we, the minority, we want to send our children to go and learn something, whatever they are going to learn, it is going to affect them. Now they go there and they learn the culture that doesn't match with them. When they come home, there is problem. Parents find it very difficult to cope with their children because they go there to learn different culture. That is why when they come home, they disagree with their parents. So what we have to do as African American teachers is to ensure that we teach our children, African American children, the right culture so they will be able to understand us. Now, look at what is happening. When we talk about school suspension, they are talking about zero tolerance policy implementation. When we are talking about zero tolerance policy implementation, it is rather targeted at the black child.
Mm-hmm.
When a white boy and a black boy misbehave in school, at the end, we see the black child be suspended to the expense of the white person because we send them to the white school, and that is the problem we are facing. So this disparity, we as educational leaders must look at this in totality to ensure that we address this issue to help African American children so that they can develop cognitively.
Hmm.
If you want your child to learn culture, you have to develop that mental set. They have to understand what kind of culture they are learning. Let me give you an example. In Africa, in my country, Ghana, we wear pants. In those days, there is no way you can see a boy who wears pants and pull it down. If you do that, I am not your father, but when I see you on the way, I will discipline you. That is the culture there. You see the disparity now? Because we try to make sure that they become disciplined in the society. So we correct children. But here you see students, when they are walking, you see they are pulling their pants. The pant is going down, they are trying to force it up. Who put it on you? Was it not yourself who did it? Who are we going to blame? So we have to send our child to the right school so they learn the right culture, because they go there to learn those culture. That is how they dress. So our children will come home and dress the same way. We need to change this mental faculty within our organization. We need to change this culture in our society to promote student success. So we need to look at all this disparity holistically to ensure that our children, African American children, are sent to the right school with the right teacher who will lead them, the right teacher who will train them. Because education, the purpose of education is to train individual to become fit in a society in which he or she find himself or herself. That is the purpose of education. Thank you very much.
No, thank you for providing that and giving us a bit of the the cultural difference as you provided in Ghana and how they would act and the importance of, like you stated, having and making sure that children, African American children, are going to the right schools, thus getting the proper guidance that they can actually apply in to their own culture and what they're dealing with. I just want to take a minute and acknowledge our audience. We have a lot of comments coming in, this great conversation that we're having. If you all have any friends, families, colleagues, parents, educators, share this live because we are talking about things that are really fundamental and current now and applicable to the African American community. And I think it's important that we continue this narrative and this dialogue just so that we become aware as we navigate through the educational system. So I want to thank you all for really digging deep into that question. I know it was very heavy, but I like to stimulate the thoughts a little bit so people understand that this is very important to discuss.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
the next question that I have is research shows that Black male teachers make up roughly about 2% of the workforce. Is Black male representation in the educational system important? If so, how? I'll go ahead and start with Dr. Lewis.
Really? Absolutely. I'm gonna keep echoing it and echoing it. So you think about um, students of color or different backgrounds seeing a reflection of themselves in leadership roles, being educators. So if you have a kid that's sagging, with their pants below where they're supposed to be, instead of talking down to them, the conversation that a Black male could have to them. I'm not a Black male, but I could assume is that, hey, I know this is the trend that's going on now, but when you mature and go out into society, this is not how you want to be represented. You don't want to be. It's a conversation, and the kids are seeing that, and you see it often in kids that are successful because just like kids clean the coaches. If you notice, I think the coaching population is more diverse than the teaching population because
Yeah.
and you see a Black coach in the student's face and he's grabbing them and talking to them and he's crying with them. It's the same thing we need in the classroom, right? Because that student is getting that relationship with that coach. I need to have the same experience. I need to talk to someone that's like me that may have not been on the straight and narrow when they were in middle school. Just a whole different grade level. They grow up when they get to high school, they get even better. when they get to college and they graduate. But just that connection and that real conversation our kids are missing. And it just goes back to the lack of support because when we bring these black males into our school systems, what kind of support are we providing them to make it? What are we doing? Are we holding them accountable for on a different level of expectations than other people? Look at the people who are leading the society, leading the educational system or wherever they are. So it's very important. I'm gonna keep stressing this that students see a reflection of themselves in the classroom, in the hallways, uh, in the community, without in the community, but they need to see levels of success. They need to know that I like playing basketball. Maybe I can be a basketball coach, but I can also teach science and I can also be a health teacher or I can also be a physical coach. We don't do enough of that. So it's very important that they see, especially young black males, see a representation of success, a representation of where they can be with hard work in the school system.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank
Dr.
you.
Sharif.
Yeah, just to agree with what Dr. Lewis is saying, and to just, again, the research has been clear about the positive effect on all students of teachers of color, Black teachers in particular. And I believe there's some recent research that indicates that Black male teachers have an even stronger positive effect on Black boys in schools. So so the emerging research is very clear on the critical role, but even beyond the research, just that cultural familiarity that we mentioned, um, demonstrating different definitions of manhood, right? We have a society that's really embraces a toxic masculinity profile as
Yes.
manhood, right? And this is across race and class. That's like the American, right. I'm dating myself, but Rambo is the American ideal of masculinity, right?
Yeah.
That's not going to be restorative in our communities, right? And we have seen the negative impact of extreme misogyny and nihilism in our communities that males have adopted for a host of reasons. So I think it's an opportunity to present different images of masculinity and maleness. Um, and so we need that balance. The teaching force is 80 somewhat percent female. So this is a way for different gender roles to be represented in schools because that's what they're going to see and need in the larger society. And I'll just say one other thing too, that I'm going to invite us and challenge us not to use minorities. We're part of the global majority, right? So we may be in lesser numbers in the United States. I think globally about these things, and minority means minor, and so I'm inviting us to dispense with that category of defining ourselves.
Thank you for that
Mhm.
statement. Dr. Kulsi, what's your thoughts?
Thank you. I think I will support both of them for what they have said. We'll be looking at this from different angles.
Yeah.
When I look at the data, in fact, I try as much as possible to see what is happening in other professions
Mhm.
because we are looking at the teaching workforce here. I will be very glad if there is any organization in the United States that will help me and other male teachers go from community to community, educate our children. Most of them is just ignorance. They don't know. We need someone who will be there as a role model to them. We need to get people who can speak to these children, the boys. When you look at the population, you see that the women population in the United States is higher than that of the male. But that doesn't give an indication that 2% of teaching force will be men. There's a problem. So we need to look at the major cause of this particular problem. Now, let's look at the salary of teachers. Because when we are looking at this issue, we have to look at other factors.
Mhm.
How much is paid to teachers? If the salary is so meager, the salary is not lucrative. You know, guys, some of them, they take into consideration all these factors too. Because they look at maybe a senator, somebody in different field. Maybe a teacher is earning like 50,000, 56,000 a year or 66,000 a year. Maybe that one, after all deduction, maybe it might be earning like 45,000 a year. Our children, our male children, will not see this as anything that can enthuse, that can ginger, that can energize them, that can motivate them. So they must say that, oh, if a teacher is earning this money, why should I waste my time? Because they have to go to training, a lot of things like this. There are other ways that they can go and become successful. I was speaking to one of them one time in my other job. In fact, he didn't know I was a teacher. I was just chatting with him. And in the process, he got to know I was a teacher. He was surprised. Because he asked me, am I saying that I'm a teacher? I said, yes. From Africa. You see the mentality there? Because the guy doesn't believe that somebody from Africa can come and teach over here. You see the problem? Now, I made another one who had a homework at work. So I was there, he was there. He could not even answer the question that was given to him. So I asked him, what is the problem? He said he didn't understand. So I took him through all the processes and we finished everything. He was surprised. He didn't also know that I was a teacher. So later I told him that I'm a teacher. I said, what? From Africa? I said, yes. I told him, you can also be a teacher. You see, our children here, our boys here, they lack some certain things that we need to meet with them on one and talk to them. They need motivation. There are people in their community who are teachers, who are male teachers. We can organize a meeting with these people in our various communities to ensure that we let them understand what it is. We need to change the mentality of our children in our communities. We need to synthesize them. We need to motivate them. We need to anacastle them. We need to force them with certain elements that can compel them to go to school. Some of them, their target is that once I finish high school, oh, I'm going to do 3 jobs, I'm going to do that. It is inheritance. They learn it from their parents. So their parents, especially their father, maybe the father is working 2 jobs at this age. Please, let us motivate our children to know that 2 jobs is not good for them at this time. They need to go to school and get a better job so they can work on 1 job that can take them for life. That is the problem. So we need to work out on this. It is practically, even though we have the data on the No Child Left Behind child, that is 2001, the policies includes all these things that no child should be left behind. But 2%, what is the problem? There is a bigger problem. We need to work as a team. We need to work as leaders in our community. We need to go back to our institution and talk to our male children in the school so that when they leave school, they can become teachers. They can become better leaders tomorrow. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I love the passion that I'm getting from all of you as we discuss this specific question and just this topic in general. And it just really resonates with me growing up in the educational system and all the things that you all are talking about, and how the disparities and the representation is not there, the necessary support. We'll have teachers that are having high turnarounds, and this is why. Exactly, these are the issues that we definitely need to look more into. The next question that I have is, what changes have you witnessed in teachers and in the educational system since the implementation of virtual schooling? I'll go ahead and start with Dr. Atkins Sharif.
Yeah. So I have not, I stepped away from the principalship in 2019, but I still maintain contacts, and my work with Escolta is directly with Boston Public Schools. One thing that I've noticed is that many teachers, most teachers have stepped up to the charge of trying to deliver remote instruction in a way that will be meaningful for students. It's meant a huge learning curve. It's also meant lots of, growing and building the plane while flying it along the way. I also think that what's happened is a very acute awareness of the ways in which lack of access has further further impacted students who have already faced a series of setbacks in schools because of lack of resources. And so lots of schools have made a deliberate effort to get hardware in people's hands. Um, but I think also there's been an emphasis on social emotional learning, which is important. And I think that the emphasis needs to continue there because the other thing that I've noticed arise is like a almost a preoccupation with what people call learning loss. And I think that that's an important thing to consider, but it needs to be contextualized in a moment where we are all in a mode of learning and uncertainty. And that perhaps rather than focus on learning loss, we should focus on the things that are being learned in this moment, right? We are learning, our children and ourselves are learning lots about our society, lots about race and class, politics, uh, uh, um, citizen participation. So perhaps the challenge is how do we measure the learning that is happening instead of preoccupying ourselves with the learning loss that we believe is also taking place.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Kulsi, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you very much. There is a saying that no condition is permanent.
Mm-hmm.
This saying is explicated in this way: a blow inevitably yours, earlier encounter extricate you from further hostilities and encumbrances. What this particular saying means is that prevention is better than cure.
Mm-hmm.
The whole world is now becoming a global village due to technology. This pandemic has brought a lot of changes in the world. If you are a teacher who has not been used to this technological advancement, then you're going to quit your job. So, what I saw when this pandemic began was that teachers all over the world, those who are not you, who are not technologically savvy, began to adjust themselves to the new situation with no excuse. You can't give any excuse because if you want to give an excuse, you're going to lose your job. So everybody was conditioned like a classical condition theory in education. We were conditioned to learn the technology by all means because it is good and we have to go by it. You cannot go to classroom. No child is going to stay in the classroom. You have to condition yourself. So this situation, though disrupted academic calendar globally, it has brought a lot of changes that I have seen. I call Africa. You will be surprised that teachers in Africa, some of them are using WhatsApp to teach because they don't have internet
Mm-hmm.
connectivity. They have to use their phone.
Mm-hmm.
This situation is very difficult for the student. They have to do their classes on WhatsApp. And there are students who do not have mobile phones. There are some who have the mobile phones, but where they are living, there is no power to power their phone. Once they don't have a power to charge their phone, the problem is how are they going to learn in the class? So they have to rely on their friends. After they went to the class, then they will be able to forward all the lessons that they had in the class to their friends after. So this situation is creating a lot of inconvenience to a lot of people globally. We are lucky that in the United States we have internet perfect running in our system, but in Africa the situation is very bad. Some of the students are home that they are not doing anything. So we have to thank God that we have found ourselves in a place that we have this facility available 24 hours, and that is helping everybody. Every teacher is adjusting to it. We are all learning and we are all improving upon it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for providing that global perspective. I mean, it does help us understand how impactful this virtual schooling is outside of the United States. Dr. Lewis, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was one of those old heads that had to get used to technology. The Lord. Uh, and I'm still getting used to the technology, the Microsoft Teams and the Zoom and all of this. But if you look at it and think about it, we talked about when the educational system was developed. It was developed what 1870s, and the time frame of we go to school at 8 o'clock in the morning. I have to get there at 7:30. The conditions were different. We used to wake up during that. They used to wake up during that time. It was designed because they had to go and work on farms and plow lands and do this. And I feel like this pandemic has pushed us to look at the advancement of education, if that makes any sense. We're not in the same place where we were in the 1800s. We don't, thank God, we don't have to go and, farm land and do it. You look at, is it a traditional 8 o'clock to 4 o'clock? Is that what we need to be effective in society? How are we incorporating the technology that we've developed in a proper way? And it forced us to look at the disparities when the Knox County school system thought about, well, we didn't have a choice about going to virtual learning. We were forced to think about, what about those students who don't have access to internet? What about those students who don't have laptops? What about those parents who don't? It forced us to put those disparities in front of us and focus on doing it, because any other time, only schools that kids could buy laptops, or if you're fortunate enough to have parents that have laptops, but the teachers are assigning the same assignments. They require you to have laptops. So there was those disparities. You may have an essay due, but you don't have a computer at the house. You can't type a 2-page essay. It's really hard to type it on the phone because you may not have Microsoft Word. It's a long text. So now it's forcing us to think about some of the disparities and how to fulfill that. Globally, we still have a long way to go. And I agree with Dr. Kusi on that. But, but thinking about the students with the free Wi-Fi, because educators, and the parents were coming out of the work saying, you can't give my child a laptop. I don't have the money to afford internet. What you gonna do? And the virtual learning, my Wi-Fi band is not strong enough. And then you even had teachers who were working in certain communities and lived out of range in rural areas. So we were forced as educators to say, okay, we're going to get thousands of dollars for laptops to provide everyone the opportunity, but we have to also offer free Wi-Fi, or we have to offer free internet access. It forced a lot of, and when we were developing the system, the things here in Knox County, we were looking around different cities and different countries, some, and how they were implementing this. So I think the educational change forced teachers educators and leaders to think outside the box. It forced us to actually address those disparities. So we didn't write it on a whiteboard in a closed conference room and say, we're going to work on having our kids access to the internet, because if not, we had to provide internet for them. We can't just put it on hold. It forced teachers to understand the learning curve. I noticed the most that sometimes our kids go through. So a lot of my teachers like to say, you got to give them grace. Remember, you've been at school since July. I need you to give the students grace. And it forced our students to understand that just because you know how to do Fortnite and do a speech, it's not the same as downloading the PDF and sending it to a teacher.
That's right.
I'm just saying, the kids were just like, I thought you can do that, but you can't do this. So it's all a learning curve that it forced us to embrace at the time and step up on the plate. And I had teachers, and I like my teachers when they go and they're having them meltdowns and I can't get my computer working. My canvas is on calendar, and I was saying, when your student has a hard time uploading to your assignment, I want you to reflect back on when
Remember that.
Remember that. I want you to think about that grandmama at the house that still has a flip phone. Some people still have flip phones. So when we're trying to do Microsoft Teams, does not work on a flip phone, you all. I want you to think outside the box. So what can you do to provide that? Is it Microsoft Teams? Is it different things? It forced us to address some of those disparities that's been hanging over our heads so many times, and we've just been the big elephant in the room that we've been putting and closing up on the conference room chart paper. So I've witnessed that. I've witnessed us embracing it, addressing some of the disparities that we already knew existed. We were able to finally come up with a practical solution. It took us a long time, but we're there, and it's still a general learning curve. It's taught our students that you're not as tech savvy as you think you are.
Right.
And parents, hey, we're old school. You can't print out everything. This Google Doc thing is, I'm not going to talk to y'all about that. Don't judge me. I had my husband right here on the side, you all. He's tech savvy. Charlene is not. I can stand in front of you and I would freak out when you had that 30-second thing. I almost had a heart attack because I was just like, "What's going on?" So we're all having that learning curve, but I think it was necessary to get us to that point. So it's been rough, but it's been very necessary, and we need to continue looking forward on how we're going to embrace this new way because we're not going to go back. We're going to
Nope.
move forward.
Nope.
How are we going to implement this
Exactly.
virtual
Yeah.
learning? What are we going to learn from here? What advantages? What do we need to tweak? How are we addressing it globally? So stop going
Mhm.
back. Look at the school frame. It may not need to be 8 to 4 o'clock or 8 to 3:30. You may need to adjust it. Um, so that's what I've noticed.
Google Docs is your friend.
I
You
know.
said what?
Google Docs is your friend.
Man, let
Okay.
me tell
Yes.
you, this is one story I want to get off subject. Don't judge me. I got a new laptop right at work, and the little girl, the little admin, she's younger than me, and she gave it to me old school. I'm going to put my date. I had my jump drives, y'all. I had it on my jump drive. I said jump drive. I did say it, and I'm looking at my laptop like there's no USB drive, and she said, "Dr. Lewis, I need you to have everything in the cloud by January." That's what I'm telling you. And I'm just like, well, what I'm gonna do with my jump drives because I got them all on my.
You got to upload everything
I
on
just
there.
what I have my jump drives, right? So it's a learning curve for us all, right? Because the
Yes,
cloud is
definitely.
the cloud makes me nervous. Where's it gonna go? What happens to the cloud? So we're all
Right.
learning. And Google Docs, I'm learning.
All right. Don't
No,
forget.
I mean, this
Don't
is the
forget.
reality we are in
Yeah,
currently. Definitely the reality. And this is a very important question because everyone has different opinions about the
right.
virtual schooling environment. But as so greatly highlighted, everyone has stepped up to the plate. Everyone is coming together, making it happen. Unfortunately, a pandemic had to bring out, or more so highlighted disparities. But I mean, sometimes it takes something profound like that for us to realize what we currently live in. But
Exactly.
we have actually come to the conclusion of this wonderful panel discussion on teacher education and leadership. I want to thank our panelists profoundly for sharing their insight so graciously, just digging deep and really providing that knowledge that is necessary to really understand teacher education and leadership. So before we go, I want the audience to know how they're able to connect with you all more to further, discuss and get more insight on your thoughts. So I would like you all just to provide me with a bit of your contact information. I'll go ahead and start with Dr. Colty.
Yeah. Anybody who wants to get to me can reach me at jamesghana2011 at yahoo.com. That is my mail email. The main one, James Ghana. Ghana is spelled G as in go, H as in hello, A as in apple, N as in Nancy, A as in apple, 2011 at yahoo.com. You may
Okay.
also reach me at james1.clotty at farming.edu. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Colty.
You're welcome.
Dr. Lewis, what are your contact?
My school email address I have it on all the time. Is charlene.lewis@knoxschools.org, and that is CHARLENE dot Lewis LEWIS at Knox Schools with an S.org. Or you can follow me on Twitter and see some of the fun things I do with my students at Charlene Lewis 63. That's not my age, but that's just a number. Just saying, I'm putting it out there, you all. It's not my age.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis.
You are.
And lastly, Dr. Atkins Sharif.
Yeah. So the best way to reach me is, I think you have the wrong email down there. You have James Donna's email. Is Jamel Sharif at gmail.com. JAMELSHARIF at gmail.com.
All right. Well, I want to thank you all again for spending time with me this evening, spending time with the audience this evening, really looking at teacher education and leadership. And again, to the audience, if you all are interested in hearing more topics like this that pique your interest, please register for the Black Doctoral Network Conference that is going to be occurring October 29th through the 31st by going to blackphdnetwork.org 2020 conference. Again, I want to thank our panelists for joining us. Thank you for sharing your information and really bringing light to this topic. And if you want to hear more, we look forward to seeing you all next time. I'm your moderator, Fesse Longe, and this is Black Doctoral Network Conversation Starters. Have a good evening.
And thank you. You are a great moderator. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Miss,
Thank you
please,
all.
Miss Vesta,